And you can see it matches almost perfectly. So, we have written accounts and stories passed down through generations. We also have pictures and other artifacts that would imply humans saw dinosaurs long before they were discovered and named dinosaur. Of course, the name dinosaur didn't come about until Richard Owens penned that name in 1841. Okay, so any document prior to that naming convention becoming popular in the late 1800s, they wouldn't have used the name dinosaur when they saw it. They would call it a monster, they called it a dragon, they called it something else. Okay, so that people have to start realizing that, well, it's not a dinosaur, they didn't call it one. But if they had seen it, they wrote about it. The Chinese zodiac symbols can be traced back to the 14th century BC, right? Popularized by the Zhou, Su, and Tang dynasties in the 6th and 7th century AD. You've got the rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, sheep, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig. What's unique about that? Every single one of those is a typical everyday animal that had a behavioral trait that was connected with the zodiac, to connect with your birth date, to connect with your actually birth year, the year of. It includes the dragon. That implies the dragon was an animal just like all the rest of these that had a character trait that you would connect with humans born in that year. Dr. Swift points out petroglyphs in the White Rock Mountains, White Rock Canyon in National Bridges, New Mexico, near Blanding, Utah. The left photo shows him pointing to where there's a petroglyph underneath this arch. It was made by the Anazi Indians who inhabited the area about 400 AD to 1300 AD. The petroglyph is a carving, and it's right down here, okay? Long-necked, long-tailed dinosaur. Native American rock art was carved in the walls of the Grand Canyon. It was discovered in 1879 by E.L. Doheny and documented in 1924 by a scientific expedition which included Dr. Gilmore, curator of vertebrate paleontology, United States National Museum. The resulting publication reported as fact that some prehistoric man made a pictograph of a dinosaur on the walls of his canyon. So, what prehistoric man had knowledge of the dinosaur's bones picked up and reassembled in a museum, and yet drew it as a complete body from stuff that hadn't yet been discovered? Only way he could have drawn it was having seen it. These petroglyphs were attributed to the Fremont Indians, or contemporary with the Nazi as well. They are found in Montrose County, Colorado, and appear to be depicted as triceratops. This one here with the three horns, possibly, including the characteristics of three horns and a neck frill, pointed out here in this picture by Dr. Patton. This tomb belongs to Richard Bell, Bishop of Carlisle, until shortly before he died in 1496. But it's the narrow brass fillet running around the tomb, this structure here, that is called to interest. Owing to the passage of time, much of it has been worn away by, obviously, feet walking on it. It's on the floor of a cathedral. So some of the pieces have been lost here across the bottom. But mixed in with the Latin inscription that goes around this side, there are these edge pieces. There's some fish, an eel, a dog, a bird, and a pig, and a few other engravings, such as this one here. Right there amongst the standard everyday animals, two sauropod-style dinosaurs. Mesopotamian cylinder seal. This art from Mesopotamia dated to 3300 BC. The animal on the right represents an Apatosaurus. The legs and feet on the Egyptian art clearly fit the sauropods very well. The biggest difference is the head. There's definitely something going on here with some sort of cartilage structure on the back of the head, but cartilage would not live through the fossilization process, and so we don't have any record of that. But that doesn't go against the potential that was a visual artwork of somebody who had seen a sauropod. Even the muscular definition of the artwork today, in the bones and legs, And the neck matches the muscular definition as shown in that cylinder seal. A Roman mosaic from 200 AD that depicts two long-necked sea monsters fighting on it, okay? Documented by Paul Taylor, the author of the great dinosaur mystery in the Bible, likens them to, he uses this web-footed Tanstropheus as his reference to what they might have been talking about here. The magnificent jungle in the temples of Cambodia that were produced by the Khmer civilization, beginning as early as the 8th century and extending through the 14th century AD. These awesome temples were rediscovered by the Portuguese adventurers and Catholic missionaries back in the 16th century. Many have been restored in the 19th and 20th centuries. Ta Prohm, one of the most picturesque, was left in its natural state. It was recently gained. Of course, recently was back when I created this first. The Laura Croft Tomb Raider movie. In there, she used this temple that they're filming. On the corner of that back temple is some elaborate carvings up and down the column. And it's on that column, there are carvings of various animals. A monkey, a deer, water buffalo, swan, parrots, lizards, and a pretty good stegosaurus for someone who had never seen or heard of one. In the early 1900s, Dr. Cabrera's father found many of these ceremonial burial stones in Ica, Peru, in their numerous tombs. Dr. Cabrera had collected over 11,000 of them, approximately one-third of which depict the pornographic culture of the Nazca Indians. Some pictures their idolatry, others represent amazing accomplishments, such as the successful skull surgery defined or confirmed by scarring, which demonstrates that some healing had occurred in a recovery. These two depict the use of a telescope, which obviously had not been invented by then, and open heart surgery. The stones were found in 1966, and of course the first open heart surgery wasn't done by modern times until 1967. So whoever had created that artwork did it. Now, of course, I guess you could say it was a sacrifice. He wanted to take it out, but the way the rest of these stones were showing these images were definitely implied these were the advancements of the culture. But along with that, about one-third of the stones depict specific types of dinosaurs: the Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Pterosaurus, etc. Several Diplodocus-like dinosaurs have dermal fins, confirmed by these features on fossil dinosaurs. Hadn't been reported until only recently. In fact, this one even has a Triceratops, and one of the guys actually riding on top of it. So, based upon our knowledge of fossils, we know the following. Man and prehistoric creatures very likely lived together. Some prehistoric creatures potentially still live today. Fossils are not normal. They form in rare catastrophic events. A global flood is a very logical explanation for all the fossil record we see today. Based upon our knowledge of the Ark, we know the following. It has very likely been seen and recorded. It was large enough to hold all the animals and the dinosaurs. It could have been constructed and been seaworthy based upon our understanding of ship construction. Based upon our knowledge of historical writings, artwork, and artifacts, we know the following. Dragons were known in many societies around the world. Various monsters have been sighted and even killed within the last few centuries. So therefore, the conclusion? Early Genesis provides a genealogy and a chronological list of events that is supported by history and the world around us. Questions? Wrapped it up in pretty good time.
So while we're on the dinosaur topic, have you heard any explanations from secular scientists as to where these ancient people who were engraving these, dinosaurs, do they just completely ignore it?
Yep.
Actually, I have one that I've heard. Can you go back to the one that was in the Laura Croft movie?
The fact that it looks like it's might potentially be a little bit wider than the rest, and so some people might claim it's been redone.
A lot of people have said that could have been any other sort of reptile. i.e. like it could have been some sort of lizard.
Is there another lizard that has
With-
those long
with
backs?
frills down the back like that?
And legs that long?
No. I mean, people could use that as an explanation. I personally think they'd be wrong, but,
That's just something
Yeah.
that I heard that they say.
Mhm.
Well,
That
yeah,
one-
the
that
question
one-
was, is there an explanation for it? And if that's the explanation they're giving, then yes, that's an explanation.
Yeah,
Not a good
that's-
one, but-
Well,
no,
good or not, you can determine on that, but what I find pretty intriguing are the ones even farther back with this, like all the ones with the super long necks.
yeah,
Because stuff like that,
Just don't exist.
like we don't see something like that
Yeah.
anywhere. Like
Mhm.
you can say like, all right, maybe those people who made that temple, maybe they were just really bad at art, and they just tried to like maybe they tried to make some sort of other animal, and
Mhm.
that's what they did. But that, I don't know.
mhm.
I guess I'm not knowledgeable enough to know where you'd see something like that.
Yeah, and frankly, it's the ones where,
Yeah.
in this case, you've got all the other legitimate, I'll say legitimate animals, scattered in amongst the Latin, terms all around this thing, and then this one's thrown in just like it's, like all the rest.
And what was the term for that one?
This particular one was from the grave here of Richard Bell. It's a strong resemblance. I mean, it's heavily worn, but it's a sauropod, long tail, long neck, foreleg.
What was the inscription on it though?
Oh, the Latin?
Yeah.
It was in regards to honoring Richard Bell, the Bishop of Carlisle.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is his tomb. I mean, he was buried there. So, and
And
they just
people
have
walk on top of his grave
Hmm?
every day.
Oh, yeah.
They just wanted to walk all
They-
over it.
Clearly.
All the, Deanna, all the cathedrals and castles and
Yeah,
stuff.
all the
they
major
have-
cathedrals in Europe have.
I mean, I know catacombs is one thing, but like
No,
citizens
this
walking
is-
right.
This is
You walk
right
on top
in
of-
the
A
main
foot above
hall.
him.
This is right in the main hall of the cathedrals, down the side aisles. There are people buried. And so when you're walking to your seat, you're walking on the.
I mean, I don't mind that
Westminster Abbey.
personally, but like that seems like a little disrespectful. But I mean, it's
They're buried in the floor and they're buried in the walls.
yeah. I mean, the walls would be a bit different. Then at least you're not
Mm-hmm.
walking on top of them.
In fact, there's a Reynolds buried in a cathedral. Yeah, so
Wow,
Nice.
nothing special.
my mom is a Reynolds, so she pointed out that, took a picture of her next to the grave site. So
One explanation I've heard about that sort of stuff, I don't think it holds much water, is that these people would look at fossils that they found, and just by, they'd find the skull on the rock and be like, that's kind of funny, and then they would just kind of,
1496. Okay.
they would just randomly, I don't think it holds much water.
Yeah,
but-
the idea that this far back, that they had found enough fossils and put the time into recreating dinosaurs, the term, that we use today and the effort that's gone through today by paleontologists and archaeologists to reconstruct these things just didn't exist back then, okay? There were no museums anywhere close to this that went to the effort of reconstructing these things. And the fact is, these aren't skeletons, these are fleshed out animals. And all of these go all over that way, fleshed out animals of ancient time periods. Some
Yeah.
people have said things like this one here, these could have been hoaxes. This is actually a bullet hole where somebody shot at it. And you can see that the tympany of the stone aged color, the stone hole, the hole made the bullet, shows the original, structure of the stone as being a white stone. And so the age of the etching matches the age of the tympany of the rest of the stone. So it's not a recent etching.
That one doesn't look quite as much like a dinosaur. Like, I mean, look, with the comparison right there, I can totally see it. But if I just saw that one, I wouldn't necessarily think that one
Yeah, that
is
would
the
be-
dinosaur. I'd be like, oh, look, it's a circle with lines.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, with that one right there, I'm like, oh yeah, totally, I can see
It
that.
doesn't have any arms, I mean, they definitely think dinosaur does that, but, or like a standing lizard or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's funny. So, on radiometric dating, why do they think it is reasonable to assume that none of the daughter element would have been present in the molten rock when it solidified?
Because if they did assume that it was possible, the dates wouldn't be old enough to justify their timescale.
So there's no scientific reasoning behind that assumption?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not gonna say it hasn't been documented somewhere. I mean, have you guys seen something about that?
Yeah, actually, we do take that into account.
Okay.
That is something that's taken into account.
Where would you, how would you come up with guessing how much?
So I'm far from being an expert on radiometric dating. There was a brief unit on it in intro class, but then we don't typically cover it since. That's typically something you'll study if you go for like a master's degree, because that's not something you're going to need with a bachelor's degree.
Understand.
So from my understanding with it is we do take into account that there's a very good chance that there's daughter element caught into it. We take into account like metamorphism can change the constant, like the amount of daughter versus parent that's in the rock, and that's also going to screw up the date. And along with that, typically when we date something, we give plus or minus X amount of million years to it. It ranges depending on how you're dating it or what you're dating it with. I don't know all those off the top of my head, but we typically do have a plus or minus range that we're like, it's about in this range. We don't typically get a strong date, but we can give you from like X million to X million. Not like it is this date. I couldn't date it down to like the year. But I could definitely give you a range.
How do the classes present the fact that when we have a rock of known age, that no dating method comes close to it?
Yeah, so that goes into account of you're going to have in those melts that when they erupt out, you're already going to have some crystals that have become solid, because there's some minerals that like they've crystallized at incredibly high temperatures. Those would be classified as incredibly unstable on Earth's surface, so we don't typically see them a lot. And so that could be one of the things is you have like one of those minerals, because typically when you radiometric data rock, you're almost grinding it up and looking at it in like a mixture, from my understanding. Again, I'm not totally sure how that works. Anyway, but with that comes, again, the possibility that you have this, the inclusion already of like the daughter elements, like the whole changing, and it could be you're just dating a rock that might have crystallized out a while ago and you just happen to grab like a bad sample. Does that make sense? Like amongst that.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that argument before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you picked a bad sample every time.
So it's like a bad grain, so typically when you have one of those, there's a lot of those in
Right.
that, so like.
Right. So never has anybody been able to pick a good sample to age a known good rock. Never.
Again, I don't know
Yeah.
much about this, so like.
And I'm just highlighting to you that there's a potential that some of what you're being told you should be concerned about. I'm just saying that, okay? So take it to heart. I'm not personally going to be an expert in radiometric dating, but there's enough concern about what I have heard and what I have seen through various studies that I would seriously question it, just to be honest.
Yeah, I will say that last spring, I was in a class it was called evolutionary analysis, okay? So when he's
Okay.
going over, and everybody in combo has to take it. So Dr. K teaches it. I'm sure a lot of you know Dr. K. So,
Not even a little bit.
okay, well, you're not in the right meeting. Anyway,
That one go.
but he was talking about, you know, how we know how these fossils are, and so he was going over radiometric dating. And I started to question him on some of this stuff, and he said right in front of class, he said, yeah, it is a little bit circular. And then he also cited an article that I asked for, and I haven't read it, but I have it, that shows that the rate of radiometric decay may not be constant. And this is like, that's just questioning that is like flipping the entire paradigm on its head, because that's one of the most basic assumptions of radiometric dating. And yet there is a article in a secular journal that is reputable that says, yeah, that might not be the case.
that the half-life might differ under certain conditions,
Correct.
moisture, temperature, etc.
And the radiometric dating dogma is that that is unalterable by any natural processes.
So there was something that you had mentioned when you, like whenever in C4 you start like talking about some of the stuff, you had mentioned something that has, it had to do with geology and the guy who wanted to free geology from
Lyle.
Moses' staff.
That is Lionel, yeah.
Lionel? Okay, you had started to explain something that I found very interesting there, and I wonder if you could remember what it was and then explain it again. It was more about the philosophy of how they come up with these ideas, and it limits their findings. Like, their philosophy behind what they think happened will cause them to redo the experiment, say, that can't be true because we know this, but then they're saying we know this because of our experiment. The circular reasoning type thing. Do you know what
I'm not sure what exactly you're talking about. Yes, I mean, I think when we're doing this kind of science, it's important to realize that we're mainly philosophical creatures that dabble in science, is what I say. You know what
You're
I
getting
mean?
on what you were starting to say.
So when before you come to science, you have to have a bunch of assumptions. You know, you have to have the assumption of laws of non-contradiction and the laws of physics, laws of math, all these sorts of things in order to do a research study.